Hello everyone, Cole Nelson here with another Manichaean video. It's been a little while since I've uploaded one, so I figured I should make a video for all of you. And today's topic is going to be Manichaeism, Determinism, and Indeterminism in an agonistic universe. By agonistic, I mean a universe in conflict. Of course, in Manichaean cosmology, we do not live in a totally harmonious universe, but because of dualism, the radical dualism of Manichaeism, you have eternal conflicting forces of light and darkness that are in conflict with each other. And that conflict echoes and reverberates down into the material world, which in fact is the primary plane now upon which that conflict takes place. And of course, you often see Manichaeism associated with determinism, the idea that we do not have free will, and also the idea that all things are predestined or according to a plan. St. Augustine, who in the West, in Christianity, is most associated with doctrines of predestination and predeterminism in Christianity, is often thought to have gotten these ideas from Manichaeism, he having been for 9 years a Manichaean. However, I want to talk about how in Manichaeism there is determinism, but I also want to talk about indeterminism, because unlike in Christianity, we do not live in a world that is ruled or governed by an omnipotent God who cannot in any sense be frustrated. That is, Manichaeans, we don't have what we might call the doctrine of divine sovereignty, right, that exists in Calvinism, whereas everything goes according to God's plan without a hitch, okay? Because evil in Calvinism, the devil is merely a creature, a creation of God in Christianity. And therefore he only has power insofar as God permits. But in Manichaeism, the Ashkelon or Oz, the Prince of Darkness, the devil, as you were, is not a creation of God, but is a eternal demonic being who exists apart from God and has true power that is outside of God's influence. And he in some ways, can frustrate God's designs. However, we are also deterministic in the sense that we believe things can only act according to their nature and always act according to their nature. As Jesus says in the book of Matthew, a good tree, right, produces good fruit, and a bad tree produces bad fruit. By your fruits you will know them. So the principle of light always desires the good and never has a positive desire to do evil. And the principle of darkness always desires that which is evil and strives against the light. What fellowship doth light have with darkness? Therefore, in a being that goodness or light is predominant, that being will tend to gravitate towards the good. Whereas a being in which darkness is predominant, that being will gravitate towards evil. When a being's light is darkness, right? How terrible indeed is that darkness, right? So that in mind, we need to understand where we are at in salvation history. Obviously, as Manichaeans, we believe in the 3 times, right? The time before mixture, the time of mixture, and the time after mixture, right? When light and darkness will be re-separated. Before mixture, they were separated. During the mixture, they are combined, and of course, in the end times, they will be re-separated largely. We're currently in the stage or era of mixture, but we are at a period in salvation history where darkness has, to some extent, is on the back foot, is certainly losing, all right? It has largely been rendered incapacitated. To reference a parable of Jesus, I think in Matthew 12:29, right? The strong man, which we often think of as the devil, right? You bind him, right, before you plunder his house. The strong man, or the devil, right, has been bound, okay? The universe itself, in Manichaeism, has been set up, as it were now, as a retrieval mechanism to retrieve the light in creation, the divine soul or spirit, and liberate it, to return it to the realm of light. Okay? And so we actually live in this universe in which light has largely been victorious. A retrieval mechanism has been set up. The forces of darkness have been not completely defanged, but they have been limited or constricted, okay, such that liberation can commence. The strong man has been bound, and now his house is being plundered. The light is being restored. So there is a thing we may call a providence, right? God has a plan. The Father of greatness has a plan, and his plan is coming about. Not entirely without hitches, because darkness is still a force that can and does sometimes frustrate the divine plan. But generally speaking, we are at a stage in history where God's plans and designs have been largely successful, and his providence, his plan, is proceeding. On the individual level, however, right, and then we're going to go back to talking about determinism and indeterminism in the individual. Our actions are determined by whichever nature is dominant in us, the light or dark at any moment. And which is dominant largely has to do with internal and external factors, right? First, the combination of one's elements within oneself. Obviously, the flesh is evil, right? So we have a sinful flesh that is comprised of darkness that wishes to constrict and work against the light, but we also have a divine spirit, a light spirit. So this is part of why Manichaeism prescribes, has dietary practices, etc., because through your very spiritual practices and diet, you can impact the combination of elements that comprise your being. And if the light mind is in you, if you have come to spiritual awakening or gnosis, though your divine being is incapable of doing evil by its nature, there is a determinism of nature. The divine nature cannot positively will evil. When we do evil or sin, that is because darkness has at least momentarily had the mastery in us and caused us to sin. But the divine nature in us is capable of the, we would say, morally neutral act of negligence, of rest, right? One can let one's guard down. All right? So in Manichaeism, the light cannot sin. It's possible for darkness to regain mastery by not being vigilant enough. And this is so where there's sort of an indeterminism. There's a determinism of nature, but there's actually an indeterminism in a sense when it comes to salvation. So this is a a difference, say, from Calvinism or in Orthodox Christianity, which has this concept of divine sovereignty, where God, by his election, is predetermining certain souls for salvation while passing over others. In Manichaeism, in the divine economy, God is reaching to awaken souls, bring them to cognizance of their true divine nature, strengthen them against darkness, and bring them to salvation. But it is possible that once the soul has awakened, that it becomes negligent, such that darkness, the old man, retakes over. And this is again because God is not omnipotent or truly sovereign in the Manichaean system because of its dualism. So upon the individual, there is some onus for their salvation. Now, in Manichaeism itself, there have been competing views in terms of the salvation of the soul, the ultimate salvation of the soul, or the light, rather, within the creation. There was within Manichaeism a series of thought, a system of thought that emerges in later Manichaeism that is universalist, that all the light will be saved, okay? By God's plan, will be entirely successful and all light will be saved. However, this seems to be at odds with the original teaching of Mani, which does seem to suggest that a small portion of light, right, will, through its own negligence, have allowed itself to become so put back into sleep that it becomes so forgetful of itself and identifies therefore so much with the darkness that it proves irretrievable, not because it has positively sinned, of which it is incapable, but because it has been negligent. And this is why in original Manichaeism, like in Christianity, you have the idea of a judgment. You have an eschatology, right? A general judgment, and you have the idea of the condemnation of sinners. And they are confined in the pit, the bolos, that was made not for them, because God does not will the death, of any one of his children. He does not wish to lose any bit of his own divine substance. So the pit, the bolus, was made solely to confine the devil and his angels. But you do have in original Manichaeism this idea that a portion of the light will become so corrupted by its coexistence alongside the darkness that it will prove irretrievable. And this is why there is an urgency, right? Why it is important to keep the divine seals, right? For instance, the elect. Why the idea of the mission of the elect is important, the retrieval of light, because there is a danger of a sort of loss of the divine substance. Allow me to read for you a passage from this work called Augustine's Manichaean Dilemma by Jason Badun. I would say Badun, but it might be Badun. I defer to his own pronunciation of his name. And I will read here. Where is it? It's a very important passage. I had it bookmarked. Here it is. Here it is. Okay. Manichaean ideology therefore required a long view of liberation that did not despair at the events of an individual lifetime. Remember, we believe in metempsychosis, or more accurately, metagismos. We believe in a reshuffling of the divine elements, of the light elements that comprise beings, back into other beings, a transfusion of elements, such that there is, in a sense, reincarnation between lifetimes. So, Manichaean ideology, therefore, required a long view of liberation that did not despair at the events of an individual lifetime, but looked forward to an ultimate dissolution of the temporary world of mixture, where death was even a possibility. Death, of course, is unnatural, right? According to our original divine selves, there would not be death, right? In fact, the death is just the coming apart of elements that shouldn't be together to begin with. In the Mesopotamian heartland of Manichaeism, a dispute reportedly arose over whether all souls would be saved in the end or not. But, by Augustine's account, Western Manichaeism taught that some souls would be forever bound to evil in the bolos, the prison made for the containment of evil at the end of time. And there seems sufficient evidence to conclude that this was Mani's original teaching. These lost souls are permanently affixed to the outside of the mass of darkness, which is called the bolos in Latin or whatever, formed at the end of time. So, yeah, and then it goes on to say Augustine skips over Manichaean accounts of the events of the end of the world, but I'll give you a hint, we do believe in a judgment. Reflecting, and Jesus is the judge, reflecting either his own disinclination to eschatology or his recognition that it did not differ substantially from Catholic beliefs. He makes only a vague allusion to, quote, the fire in which the world will be burned up, and jumps straight to the final stage of things where evil is confined to a single massa, or in Greek, bolos, is Greek, permanently disabled by webs of the remaining light souls driven into it. Ironically, these binding elements remain with evil to fulfill their good function only because they have been so mingled and identified with evil that they have lost their ability to be extricated from it. For Manichaeus, in his fundamental epistle, says that these souls deserved to be thus punished because they allowed themselves to be led away from their original brightness and thus became enemies of holy light. So it's not that they positively willed evil, but they allowed themselves to be led astray through negligence. And I would say, to whom much is given, right, much is required. So the typical person is not, I would say, does not have the agency to fully allow themselves to become led astray because the knowledge has not come to them. But it is possible to, after having tasted the heavenly gift, as it were, to fail to be vigilant enough that you remain outside the dominion of darkness. And if that dominion regains mastery over you, it is possible that you may never reemerge from that mastery. And that is why Manichaean asceticism is important, for those who have obtained to full knowledge. So in that sense, there's a difference, say, between Orthodox Christianity, especially of the Calvinist variety, and Manichaeism, although the two are often equated. But any similarity is in that there is a determination of nature. Before man is enlightened by the light mind to come to a knowledge of his true divine self, he is, as it were, spiritually dead, enslaved to darkness, the natural darkness that comes with embodiment. So that does demand a sort of unilateral divine intervention by the light mind and God's messengers. That is, man requires divine grace to be resuscitated, for the new man to come into being. And there is parallels with Orthodox Christianity in the sense of Calvinism that derives from Augustine. So Augustine may be influenced by Manichaeism here, but in rejecting dualism and the agonistic universe, the universe in conflict that Mani taught, and instead accepting monism and a doctrine of divine sovereignty, Augustine's universe and the universe of Orthodox Christianity is much more, in that sense, deterministic than Mani's universe, because in Augustine's universe, salvation, God's providential plan, inevitably goes off without a hitch, because evil, well, for Augustine, doesn't really even have being, since he ascribes to a privative view of evil, but evil, insofar as it even exists, we'll say, only exists by God's permission and to serve as part of his plan. God makes light and darkness in Orthodox Christianity, right? Good, evil is the Old Testament, which we largely reject, says, has not evil been done in the city, right? And God himself has not done it, right? God is, in Augustine's system and in Orthodox Christianity, because of divine sovereignty, or at least divine foreknowledge, is, in a sense, the one who is working out all things according to the counsel of his will. And in Manichaeism, well, we would say, God has a plan of providence and is working things out, right? After the counsel of his will, this is not being done in a way that will necessarily be without a hitch, because evil has a real power, tragedy is real, and God does truly will the salvation of all, right? Though not necessarily equally, because God may have to strategically deploy his grace, but because all beings are parts of him, have the divine light substance, he truly does have a genuine salvific will for all, and is trying, and is, in a sense, insofar as any are truly lost, is in a sense frustrated and grieved. This you cannot say in the Orthodox Christian system, except insofar as they make, in the Orthodox Calvinistic system. In other schools of Christianity, they make free will, as it were, above God. But we Manichaeans have a determinism of nature. So we reject free will in that sense. Like I said, we believe man being good, the true nature of man, the light in him being good, cannot positively will evil. And we cannot ascribe free will as the origin of sin, like many of them do. Many of them go back to the fall, of course, of Adam, and believe Adam had free will, and he brought sin into the world through the misuse of his free will. But we Manichaeans do not believe that divine entities, would sin. Therefore, we cannot ascribe the beginning of evil to an act of the will, right? So yes, so there's a strong difference there. But yeah, so that's what I wanted to meditate upon today. Just how the Manichaean system is deterministic, and yet at the same time, Manichaean cosmology is also, in a sense, indeterministic because of the agonistic nature of the universe. There's a determinism of nature. Beings cannot act in any way except according to their natures. They can't act contrary to their nature, which would be ridiculous. But at the same time, because there are conflicting natures and they both have power, we are not in a system where God is sovereign, totally sovereign, right? In total control. There are things that happen outside of God's plan and purpose. So yeah, I just wanted to make that video meditation. I hope that's interesting to some of you. Be well.